safe space. So obviously, you know, no question is stupid. There's no right or wrong kind of approach to what you want to take away from the event. It is just a safe space for everyone involved. It is a free event, and it always will be a free event. Everyone is welcome, whether they're experienced, junior, have no knowledge of testing, just want to start getting their head around things. I think we might even have some people there tonight that might be in other walks, such as developers. So everyone is welcome. Please be respectful to others, whether you are online or in person. If there is anything that has made you uncomfortable or anything that you've not enjoyed about the event, please just report it to Chris or myself. And breaking the rules will lead to banning from future events. It's not something we've ever had to do before, and I hope that it remains that way. So we are really lucky to have a guest speaker this evening. It's obviously, again, the dynamic of having a guest speaker online, but obviously speaking to some people in the office as well. So hopefully it'll all run smoothly. Added into the mix, Carlos isn't actually in the UK. He's joining us from the US. So it's all kind of all systems go, but we're really grateful. He actually jumped in kind of fairly last minute because our original speaker actually has caught COVID. So really grateful that Carlos jumped in and saved the day. I'm really looking forward to hearing what he has to say. A little bit of background: he is the Director of Engineering at Stealth Startup, founder at QA at The Point, and he does a lot for the test community as well, things with Ministry of Testing, and I believe he's quite active on YouTube with various kind of demos and tutorials. So please do give him a follow. I think he's most active on Twitter. I'm sure he'll correct me if he's wrong when he has his chance to talk, but a really great person to follow if you're in QA or looking to get into QA. So I think we are going to get Carlos to kind of kick things off and do his talk first. And then obviously if anyone online or anyone in person has any questions at the end, we can kind of field those towards Carlos. So what I will do now is I'm just going to make it so you can share your screen if that's okay. Just let me have a little look. Bear with me one second. Perfect. So I am just making you the host now. So you should be able to then go ahead and share your screen. Do you just want to test out and see if that will work? Oh, there we go. Okay, perfect. Yeah, we can see your screen now. If I can just, I forgot to say as well, if everyone can just pop themselves on mute, just so there's no background noise while the talk is on, and then we'll do questions and answers at the end, as they say. Perfect. I'll hand over to you, Carlos.
All right. Thank you very much, Gabby, and Chris as well, for having me over. I'm glad that I was able to step in and be able to talk about kind of my journey into testing and automation. So yeah, so we'll get into it because we only got 30 minutes, and hopefully I don't cover too much. But like my title suggests, I started as a phone salesman at a company called Sprint. I was selling phones, and from there, that was like 8-9 years ago. And now I'm a director of engineering at a startup that's doing machine learning and artificial intelligence. So it's pretty cool. It's been quite the 180. So I wanted to kind of go over my journey and what I did. Gabby already talked about this quite a bit, so I'll just skim right over. I'm a director of engineering at a company called Quality right now. It says still startup because I have reasons for not promoting the company I'm with yet, but it doesn't matter too much. Before that, I was a test architect and engineering manager at Adobe. I'm an instructor on Test Automation University, which I think is a very, very awesome platform to learn test automation for people that are brand new or even people that are seasoned. It's a great resource to use. Like Gabby pointed out, I'm the host for the Ministry of Testing podcast. There's a few of us that are the hosts, but I'd recommend to give that a listen if you like the podcast format of things. I do lots of open source development, mainly with Python stuff. And you'll see me do a lot of that if you follow me on Twitch or watch me on the Twitch streaming. I do lots of programming and automation on Twitch as well every weekday. And then lastly, I do lots of speaking events, kind of like this. I mainly go so I can learn from people smarter than myself, but sometimes they ask me to speak as well. And so I share my experiences and stuff. It's a lot of fun. Oh yeah, and then lastly, the founder of QA at The Point, which is the software quality and testing community here in Utah. So alrighty then, All right, let's get right into it. So I like to start off by telling people that I have no degree and I have no certifications. I still don't. I have none of this in the testing or quality space. Um, I mean, it was a choice, right? I was going to the university at the beginning, but at the time I was recently married. I then had my first daughter, and I just wasn't making enough money. So I ended up dropping out of the university to take a second full-time job to pay for that. So I won't go into the depths of that experience unless you have questions, of course. But because of that, I never finished the university. I only had like 6 months in it. And yeah, ended up going to Sprint. And there I made more money than the two full-time jobs I had. And my whole goal was I got to get to salary to take care of my family. And I knew that the manager at the building was making $60,000 or something like that as the Sprint store manager. And I was like, I want to make that kind of money. That sounds like a lot compared to my like $18 an hour I was making at the time. And so my whole goal was to become a manager at Sprint, and that was my trajectory to get to salary. And so how the heck did I go from that, which had nothing to do with testing or quality at all, go from that, want to be a manager at a store, to then getting into software testing? It's pretty crazy. Well, what ended up happening was I got my first testing job because of Magic Gathering. I don't know if any of y'all have played trading card games or have played Magic the Gathering yourselves. But I would go to tournaments just like this, where there'd be thousands of people, and you play for a lot of money. And when you go to these kind of events regularly, I was very competitive at the time. You would see the same people over and over and over again, and you become friends with them, and eventually you start talking about your interests and what do you do. And so I talked about, like, yeah, I was trying to get into graphic design and I wanted to build video games, and I wanted to, I realized I was a terrible designer. So I was like, what if I could code the video game instead? And so those 6 months I was at the university, I was learning C#. At the time, C# was not free, it was very expensive. And I had this license for Visual Studio. And so I was on my own time kind of learning some programming with C#. And I was just telling my friends that. And one of the people next to me heard that and said, hey, wait a second. So you're doing some programming C#? I'm like, yep. He's like, you're not currently working in tech? I'm like, nope. He's like, huh. It's like, well, you normally top 8 these events. Like, you're very good at these Magic tournaments. He's like, I think that skill, that attention to detail, that planning, that foresight, the like all of that, I think would make you a really solid software tester. And I was like, okay, like I had no idea what he was talking about, right? But I was like, all right. He said, come in for an interview, and I'd love to interview you. And so the next weekend, went into the company, interviewed, and apparently I aced the interview. And the question that they said got me the job was they asked me, how would you, like, here's this app, how would you test this app, or how would you break this app? And it was a subscription-based app. And I didn't know. I'm like, how do you break the app? I'm like, I don't know. You throw the phone against the wall? I got to know what you mean by breaking the app. So I just told them, like, well, I can tell you how I mess with one of the apps I have. I'll change my calendar date on my system. And so I'll have a 7-day trial. But if I keep resetting the phone system's calendar, then I essentially have a infinite trial. And apparently that answer was enough for them to say, huh, yeah, we didn't think about that. And they had that bug in their app. And that's what got me the job. So because of Magic the Gathering and the connections I had, that's what got me into it. I'll come back on this a little bit later, but interesting, right? Very, very interesting. So once I got the job at this place, I was making $50,000 US dollars a year, and that was the most money I ever seen in my life. And so I was very excited for that. But immediately I knew that, like, I don't know anything about the tech space. I don't know anything about programming for real. I don't know anything about software testing. So when I started there, my boss, who's the person who recruited me, that became my mentor for testing. And I said, like, dude, I don't know. I need you to help me out, level me up, make me better. He did a great job of that. But on top of that, I said, well, I want to keep going on with my C# programming skills. I want to find someone that can help me with programming and mentor me for that. And so I went to the developers and talked with them about, my goals and what I was trying to do. And I was the first tester there that had actually talked to them about wanting to learn programming. And so they were actually pretty excited about it. And one of them became a friend of mine and ended up mentoring me for programming as well, and helped me really get into it. And then combine the testing that I was learning from my manager with the software engineering that my programming mentor was teaching me. And eventually I was like, wait a second, I can use these two things and I can start automating. And I didn't call it that, but I can start using code to get rid of these tests that I have to do day in, day out that, oh my gosh, were super boring to do. I could have a machine do that for me if I just knew how to code it. And then I got into Selenium because of that. And that's what launched me into my career and really got me into the test automation space. So unfortunately, eventually the good times had to end. I got let go. And I went out to go look for more testing jobs. I ended up getting rejected a bunch of times, but mainly because like one of the things was they were looking for an automation engineer. I'm like, hey, I've done test automation, but they're like, well, you've done a little bit, I guess, but not like real programming. And that term stuck out to me when they said you haven't done real programming. I was like, what does that even mean? So I thought that was really curious. But another instance I had, the very last rejection I got was at another a company that does like car dealership stuff. I went in. There was a very super long table, like one of those massive ones where like on one end you have to like yell at the other person on the other side. Like it was that long of a table, and there was about 6 or 7 people on one side of the table, and then 3 or 4 people on the phone in the middle of the room. So I had like 10 or 12 people talking to me in this interview. And they were asking me tons of programming questions. I was getting a lot of them correct. I thought I was doing great until finally one of them said, wait a second, I see here in your resume that you don't have a degree. And I was like, well, yeah, that's right. And he said, okay, well, I'm going to change my questions then. He said, so the first question I have is, can you describe to me what an access modifier is? And I remember him saying that, I'm like, oh crap, like, and I'm thinking like, I don't know what that is. And so I just asked, could you give me an example? Because I don't know the term access modifier, but I'm assuming that I've worked with it because I've been coding for the past 2-3 years. And so once he told me, yeah, it's like public or private in programming. And I was like, oh yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yep, in C#, you have public, you have sealed, you have protected. And I even explained each one and gave examples of when I've used each one. I thought I recovered from the bad answer I originally gave. But no, I didn't. Eventually this person said, well, if you don't even know something as simple as an access modifier, and he looked around the room, and started like chuckling. He was like, then I don't think you're a good fit for what we're looking for. And I didn't really know what to say because again, I have these 7 people in front of me all laughing, right, that I didn't get the access modifier thing. And I obviously was hurt. I was very embarrassed. I left and went to my car after the interview was over. And I could have been super mad. I mean, I was mad for a good like 30 minutes. I was pretty pissed. But eventually I was like, well, I should have known what that access modifier thing is because I've worked with it so much. And you can't not work with it if you're in a language like Java or C#, like you're just naturally working with them. But that taught me something that because I didn't go to school, I didn't have these foundational things. My mentor in programming was teaching me all this more advanced stuff to solve the problems I was trying to solve. And so I didn't spend the time to learn these foundational things and these basics. And so I thought, okay, well, before I go to my next interview, I'm going to learn the basics of C#, the foundations of it. So that way, if anyone ever asks me again what an access modifier is, you better believe I'm going to get this thing right. And now I can tell you I'm very, very good at access modifiers. You ask me anything, I'll tell you. I even know how to spell access modifier in case you're curious. Anyway, so did a bunch of research, did lots of practicing the week before my next interview. And then in my final interview, they asked me nothing dumb like that. They gave me some whiteboarding challenges and I was able to complete both challenges really well. And they said, awesome, like you're a great fit. I was like, cool. So I ended up getting that job. And that was at a wonderful company called Jane.com. It's a boutique for clothing, but now they have a bunch of stuff on there like for furniture and pets and whatnot. But it originally started as a women's boutique online. Whew. So fast forwarding, I'm at Jane now, And I was the first test automation engineer they had there, and they wanted me to essentially write all of the test automation there. They're like, we only have 3 testers, and we have 60 developers, and obviously there's a bottleneck with testing. And so you being experienced in test automation, if you can come in and just automate all of it, that would, speed us up. That was the idea. I don't know if I can't see all spaces. I don't know if anyone's nodding, going, okay, I've had the same experience, or if I don't know if you've had to go like deal with something like that before. But I learned that they had no budget to hire other testers. I was the only automator. So yeah, I literally had 3 testers, and I had to do all of this with just them.
Oh,
but anyway,
sorry to interrupt. You might have got a request invite to let Andy Grant into the Zoom chat. Can you let him in, please?
How does one? Hold on. Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I'll just show all these bullet points then, because they're all there already. So yeah, so with that, I didn't have anyone to teach me test automation. I didn't have anyone to teach me any of that. And so I was now the person that the testers were looking to mentor them in testing and mentor them in automation. The manager that I ended up reporting to was the best manager I've ever worked with in my life. Super, super awesome individual. So without asking for it, I ended up having a mentor for leadership. And he taught me a lot of how to work with people, how to listen, and how to have this like personal management style with each person. Doing a like the differences and the pros and cons in like micromanagement versus giving someone a framework and principles and getting out of their way. Like he taught me a lot of different styles, techniques that I didn't even think about. And so that was something helpful for me, is that I had this mentor for leadership. From there, the automation engineering bit was no longer just test automation. The stuff I was doing was now dealing with pipelines, was now dealing with cloud engineering, was now dealing with infrastructure. I was dealing with a lot more of the systems end to end, where in my previous job, I was just writing tests and someone else handled all of that. And so here at Jane is when I learned that I, as the test automation engineer, would have to take on a lot more of the automation engineering around the systems and services that we were supporting. And so there was one person who was a cloud engineer. You may have heard of them as like an infrastructure engineer or a DevOps engineer. Any of those terms I would say are kind of synonymous, but this person helped me out in how to get into Docker, how to get into Kubernetes, into the cloud, GCP and AWS, like all of that, this person helped me out with, and we worked very, very closely. So of everyone I worked closely with, the DevOps engineer is the person that was me and him were like at the desk pairing and ensembling all the time. And so he helped me a ton there, and I learned a lot. Eventually, my manager left the company, and I ended up reporting to the CTO. And that got me to see how the business is run, the decisions that they were making and why they were making those decisions. Before that, I'd always just heard complaints. Like, I can't believe they pivoted this, or I can't believe they changed their mind here. And before, like, you just also be part of the complaining, right? You're like, I was working on this, and now you're telling me that's not the priority. Now you're shifting gears. Like, what the heck? Why can't you let me finish? I actually got to see why the CTO was making these kinds of decisions and the thought process behind all of that. And so that tied everything for me, I would say, end to end, from where I was as an individual contributor into now here's why we're making these decisions at the strategic level, and then it goes down into the tactical level. I learned a whole bunch. From this experience. So Jane is probably where I learned the most in my career, was my few years at Jane. From there, I learned that there are local and global communities. I had no idea. So I didn't know that there were people that actually got together and talked about, like, hey, we all love iOS development. Let's get together and talk about it. I had no idea that was a thing. And so I ended up learning about like Ministry of Testing at this time, because at Jane, the building that we were at, they would host a bunch of meetups. And so there was one called Cocoa Heads that was for all the iOS developers. And they would meet once a month, and Jane would provide all the food, they'd provide the venue, they'd provide prizes. Everyone would get together, learn from someone, and then they would just network and talk to each other. And I saw people get interviewed on the spot, like in a booth. People get jobs. Like it was crazy to see that. And I'm like, what the heck? I want the same thing for quality and testing, like for my thing. And there was nothing like that here in Utah. So I ended up having to make one. So I ended up making one, and that's what Q8 the Point ended up turning into. Was I wanted to create a community that did the same thing Cocoa Heads was doing, but not just meet once a month to talk about stuff. I wanted to do these weekly trainings and workshops, so that way the monthly meetup could be these high-level topics, and during the week you would have these hands-on workshops and be able to take those things back to work and do that, right? So that's kind of what my vision for what this community was at the beginning. So my goals for the community was to, number one, provide value, right? If it wasn't valuable, it wasn't going to work. So I want to provide value. I wanted people to network and make connections, which is probably one of the biggest benefits of being in a community, is just networking and making connections. I mean, shoot, I got my job in software testing because I was networking and making connections playing a card game. So you can only imagine if it was, dedicated to the testing space. I wanted to keep people up to date with strategies, tools, different vendors, like what are the pros and cons of each one. Have more direction with that rather than you have to Google search everything. And that could be a spiral of knowledge that gets pretty tiring. I wanted people to find mentors. As you saw in all my other slides, every place I went to, including Sprint, every place I went to, I always looked for a mentor. Someone that I knew was smarter than I was, had more experience than I did, and I wanted to learn from this person. So that way, instead of, again, me having to search everything on my own, I would have a mentor that could direct my learning and make it a lot more valuable and accelerate it. So my community, I wanted to provide the opportunity for mentors and mentees to meet each other, make those connections, and there you go. I want people to ask questions, to start conversations, and just like your guys' code of conduct, right, where there's no dumb question, right? You want to have this safe space where you can explore, ask questions, give ideas, give experiences. You want to have that safe space for people. I want people to find jobs and level up, whether you're brand new. I didn't want people to find their software testing opportunity at a Magic the Gathering tournament. I'd rather you know that there's a community like this or like Q8 the Point, and you can find those jobs that way. Want to be diverse and inclusive, because I'm always the only brown person in every company, apparently, for some reason. So I wanted to be a lot more diverse, a lot more inclusive for everyone. Everyone can be part of it, instead of feeling like there's only one certain group that can do it. And lastly, I wanted Utah to be globally known for software quality and testing. Random state of Utah here in the US. This was a big goal of mine, but I wanted everyone to think about like Q8 the Point and Utah, and like, that Silicon Slopes place is actually pretty good at what they do. So big goals. But yeah. Now that was my goal for the community, but my goal for me was to make my brand, Carlos Kidman, my brand, so well known that I would never be embarrassed in an interview again. Right? I didn't want me not having a degree to be something people kept talking about. It was getting really annoying. And eventually you get to a point where like, listen, I know my stuff, and I probably know it better than the people that do have a degree. So I don't want that to be a topic of conversation anymore. I just want you to know that I'm good at what I do. I know what I'm talking about. And instead of me begging for you to hire me, you're begging to hire me. Right? And so I wanted to make it, not having a degree, I wanted to be irrelevant. And I can say that happens now, by the way. When I got acquired, or I got sought after Jane, for the place I was at after that, Workfront, for Adobe, for this director of engineering position, I have not applied for a job in like 6 years. I now have people headhunting for me and wanting to bring me in, and the degree thing isn't even once touched. So I got there, fortunately. And now Q8 the Point, you can visit it at qap.dev, but Q8 the Point is alive very well. We have our YouTube channel. We've had, for the past year, we've had amazing speakers from Lisa Crispin and Angie Jones. Just recently, we had Joe Calantonio. Like, we've had amazing speakers come to this event. We have awesome workshops throughout the week as well. All of it's completely free to our community members. It's only getting better, and it's not even just a Utah thing. We have people from all over the world joining, and it's such an amazing thing to see. And now I have a board of people that help me run this, because it's big enough that I can't do it myself anymore. So I'm blessed to have this opportunity of helping others in this space, and that we got there, and we'll just keep getting better and better. So yeah. So yes, sharing with others, learning from others all over the world is kind of what we're doing now with QAP. And you can see that the goals change it a little bit, right? But in the end, we're still trying to be diverse, inclusive, valuable, helping others so we can learn from others as well. Alrighty then, to wrap things up, tips to level up. Put yourself out there and engage with your communities. If you're listening to this, you're probably already doing so. So just keep putting yourself out there and engage with people. Ask questions, be uncomfortable, like that's okay. But putting yourself out there it's going to open so many opportunities for you. Invest time in learning and sharing, and I recommend to do it publicly. So if you're learning something, what if you blogged about it? What if you wrote a tweet about it? If you're doing things publicly, then you're not only increasing your brand, but you're also helping others after you to get there in a better way, right? So you're kind of paving the road for people after. So yes, doing it publicly, I'd highly recommend. Find mentors to direct and accelerate your learning. Make mistakes, but do retrospectives. So yes, people will say like, you want to fail. It's good to fail because then you learn. Sure, like I don't think anyone wants to fail, but making mistakes is okay. But do a retrospective for yourself to say, what could I do better? How could I improve? Where do I want to be at? What are the steps it's going to take to get there? It's like when I got rejected in that massive table room, I could have just been mad and said, well, testing's not for me. And I could have just left, right? But instead I paused for a sec and said, well, actually, what is this telling me? What is this teaching me? And what can I do to not get rejected again? And that retrospective helped me get the next job at Jane. Leadership and communication are necessary skills regardless of the role that you're in. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. And remember, the very last thing is that you have a brand. Whether you like it or not, you have a brand. And the question is, what does your brand represent? What are people saying about you? What are they questioning everything that you're doing, or does it just make sense? Are you happy with your brand? You'll see people on Twitter will say things like, "Oh, if you want to follow me, I do blockchain and web development and JavaScript," and they kind of like put their own little brand in a tweet, and yet they get tons of engagement and tons of followers because of that, right? So sticking to that brand and what do you want to represent and all of that, right? I think is helpful as well. So just know that whether you like it or not, you do have a brand to leverage it. And the last thing, I'll just put these all in here. Some resources to help you level up. Communities and social media, just like this one, the QABC. Engage, participate. How can you help others? Are you looking for a mentor? Are you looking for a mentee? Just engage in them. Testautomationu.com, fantastic resource. They have a plethora of languages, Python, JavaScript, Ruby, you name it, they have it. So I'd really recommend going there, especially if you're a beginner. Ministryoftesting.com is a huge one. QA at the Point, we have our own YouTube channel, as well as if you go to meetup.com, you'll see us there and can join our weekly workshops and stuff. And then lastly, I do stream on Twitch every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday around this time. So yeah, there's lots of stuff to help you out. And with that, I'm done. So I don't know if I have time for questions, but boom, there it is.
Can you hear me?
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm sure we've got time for some questions if anyone has them. But first of all, thank you so much for that. I think everyone will probably agree that it's very, very inspiring to see kind of how you've moved through the ranks and so quickly as well. I actually will kick off some questions, but I had one thing that I wanted to ask myself. You mentioned mentoring and getting a mentor and the importance of that a few times. Has that been something that's happened organically for you in your jobs, or have you actually had to say, will you be my mentor? And if so, how did you approach that?
Yeah, so I think the first job I had, right, where I said like the mentor for programming, the mentor for testing, the mentor for testing one was very organic because it was the person that recruited me from the Magic tournament. Yeah. Right. And so he was the testing manager. And so when I explained to him, like, dude, I can't believe you're offering me the job. Like, I just want to be super clear. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. And he was like, no, that's okay. You know, like, I'll teach you. So organically, that one kind of happened.
Yeah.
But for the programming one, at the time, the testers were on one side of the building, and you had to go through a door, across a hall, into another door to get to the developers. So we were completely isolated from each other. And so that was even more of an effort for me to walk across the room into a group of people I have no idea who they are, and go to lunch with them and say, hey, I want to talk to you guys because I'm really curious into getting into programming. What would you say is a good way to do that? And they're like, oh, well, just come to lunch with us and we'll talk about it. I'm like, cool. And like, I had to go across the room, right? I had to go through those doors and talk to them about it. They could have just said, what the heck, this random kid, and like, get out of here, we don't want to talk to you. But instead, they were actually really gracious about it. And like I said in the presentation, like, they were actually really excited that I wanted to get into programming. And they wouldn't stop talking at lunch. You know, they're like, well, I would do this, and I would do this, and I would do that. And eventually I was like, well, I'm doing testing, and I have my C# license for another 3 months before I have to pay for it again. And they're like, oh, well, don't worry about that. The company will pay for your license. We'll help you do that. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I think they ended up becoming friends and wanting me to succeed in that, but I had to go talk to them. If I just stayed on my side of the building, that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, definitely. And it kind of goes back to what you said during your talk, that, you know, sometimes things are going to be a little bit awkward and a little bit uncomfortable, but that is kind of how you change things, especially if you are, you know, a career changer and you don't have that degree backing. You are going to have to put yourself out there at times. And, you know, you are kind of testament there to how that pays off.
Yeah, I mean, it can be super uncomfortable, but it's definitely worth it. It's definitely worth it. If it's something that you want to do, like, if I didn't do the things that I did, I would be at Sprint.
Yeah.
Still, I guess T-Mobile now, but I'd be at T-Mobile as like I don't know, some director of something there for like a zone here in Utah, and making maybe $80,000. Where now I'm a director of engineering, making much more than that.
Yeah.
And I'm doing what I love now. So I'm so happy that I put myself out there.
Yeah, definitely. And does anyone else have any questions, whether it be there with you, Chris, if you want to field them, or if it's anyone that's online, if you want to put it in chat or just ask it out loud?
Yeah, can you hear me loud and clear?
Oh yeah.
Oh, thank goodness for that. Yes, I feel like a giant on the world's smallest little microphone. Yeah, it was a point that you kind of, it's not crazy, but it's it was a question that you got asked during your interview. It's like, how would you break the app? But it's like, as a founder, it's like, as sort of like testers, we don't break things, we just merely find them, because the thing is already broken, is we're more exposing it than anything else. That's the thing I kind of pointed out at my last interview. And they were like, oh, we never saw it that way before. I was like, yeah, I know, I don't break it. It's there for me just to find. That is more my role. It's like, there's a common misconception that we break things. It's like, we don't. It's already broken. Don't need to burst your bubble when we find the break. So yeah, it's like nice to hear that question is still kind of being asked. It's like,
I mean, that was almost 10 years ago. So I mean,
fair enough. Yeah.
To be fair, the person who recruited me, they didn't have any prior testing experience either. So they got put into that role as a test manager mainly because of their personal connections in the company, and that's more like political stuff that was happening in terms of the company. But just know that, like, that was a long time ago, and I totally agree with what you're saying. I agree that if I was able to bypass that because of my simple calendar trick, like, I didn't break it and I didn't introduce that bug, right? It's just like, oh, hey, look what I found. I was able to work around your thing, and seems pretty bad on your part, team. You know, and so I totally agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, it's like, this was back in March, and the company I work for, I am the only QA tester in the whole company. So it's like, yeah, they're like similar to yourself. They never had that until, you know, we kind of came along. It was like, we're okay. Where do we start?
Yeah.
So does anybody have any questions? I will have to come to you with the mic. So I just point at you.
We got a question online.
We've got an online question, Chris.
Yeah.
Hit me with it.
Well, basically, I'm looking at switching from a career in science now over to software testing. you like just don't have the flexibility, or just like the work-life balance is just not non-existent basically. So yeah, I've got my ISTQB foundation level tester exam booked in for next month. I'm trying to do like participate on projects on UTests, the crowd testing platforms and stuff like that. But basically, there's just so much information out there. After I get my STQB, where do you think I should focus my attention? On that should be like the testing tools, or what would you suggest would be like a proper standout? Because I'm building a CV, like an IT CV from scratch, basically. So I'm just trying to highlight exactly what would be in demand at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, right now, just in our last meetup that was this last week, we had Joe Calantonio talk about what are the testing trends for the next year, and I can share that link with Gabby and Chris if you would like to watch the video. But I think right now, like some of the big things that are coming up would be, are you able to not just work with the website or the UI itself, but do you understand enough about how the back end of an application that you can also test there? And so I'm not talking about like you have to know how to code or anything. It's just, can you work with Postman, for example? And so Postman has an awesome Postman University, completely free again. Test Automation U also has Postman courses completely free. I would say if you could build a demo with Postman and share that with people, I think that would be a really great way for you to say, hey, I've done the ISTQB now, but here's me actually applying it to something real world, and look at me do it with Postman. And you wouldn't have any programming experience to do that.
Yeah, that's great, because I was looking at either doing Python or JavaScript as well, for just to get some something a bit more than just I have the theory. I want more hands-on practical experience as well. So that's great. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So I think building a portfolio basically of something, right? So you'd have like your own Postman collections. Maybe you have a GitHub repo that's doing something in JavaScript, one that's doing something in Python. It could just be something as simple as you're going through the Test Automation U courses, and instead of you just coding it to your laptop, you code it into GitHub, and you're just following what the instructor is doing, but you're putting it in GitHub so it's public. So if someone talks about, hey, do you have any Python experience? And you go, well, professionally, no, but I have taken Python courses, and here's a link to my GitHub that shows that. Again, it gives you a lot more ammunition to talk about rather than, well, yeah, I know Python's cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
I completely agree with you. I mean, obviously, I'm looking at it from a recruitment perspective, and I think that just anything that you can do in terms of, extracurricular, or, even I say to people, if you attend this meetup, put that you attend this meetup on your CV. It's just all about building that picture of you being someone who is proactive and ambitious, and you're not just waiting for someone to give you a chance. You're putting the groundwork in to make that chance happen. So I think, yeah, all of Carlos's advice there as well, there, kind of putting the wheels in motion right away.
Brilliant. Cheers, both.
100% agree. Yeah, you can imagine that, like we open up a rec or a position for a tester. At Adobe, when I would do that, I would have 200 applicants within 3 days, easy. Anytime I made a position for a tester. And unfortunately, as the hiring manager, you have to go through that as quickly as you can. And so you can't just call every person, right? That just doesn't scale very well. And so you have to look at resumes and say, I think this person fits better and the other person aren't. You kind of have to, and it sucks that that's the case, but you do that. And so what can you do to stand out from other people? And everything that Gabby is saying and that I'm saying will help you stand out. We get a lot of testers that just say like, oh, I have the ICQB certification, and then that's it.
Yeah, that's what I don't want to do. I want to have something a bit more than that, because otherwise that's a really short CV, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly right. And then I would also play to the strengths of, you said that you were in science before. Play to that strength, right? Before I was a tester, I was at Sprint, and I was also before that I was a mentor for troubled teens at a therapeutic school here in Utah. And yet I was able to bring those same exact skill sets and talk about it in my interview, and say, like, whenever, because one of the questions they asked is like, let's say a developer tells you that you raise a bug, and they say, I don't know why they talk like this, by the way. This is my voice for them. But like, this developer, like, you tell them that there's a bug, and then they say that's not really a bug. Then what do you do? Right. I think that's a pretty common question that people ask for testers. And I went over how I handled teenagers who hated my guts from 13 to 18, like 13 to 17 years old. They hated me. They would call me names. They'd just be pissed at me. Like, Carlos, I don't even know why you're here. Like, my parents forced me to be here. I don't want to talk to you. You know, they hated my guts. But yet I was able to be patient with them, talk to them, listen to them, until eventually, like, for a lot of them, I became a friend of theirs. And we ended up being friends outside of that. And even now they'll be like 25, and yet we're still friends, you know. And these are kids who, again, at the beginning hated my guts. And yet how did I go from that kind of a relationship to turning it into something where we had respect for each other, and they understood. They apologized to me. Carlos, I'm so sorry I said these racist things to you. I was in a bad place at the time, and I want to make it up to you. I'm like, no, dude, you know what? You're okay. That's totally fine. I see where you were. And we have these kind of conversations with these kids. And so I can take that and say, well, imagine me talking to an adult. You know, like, they're probably not going to be saying those kinds of things, but the problem is still there. They still disagree with me. And so it's not that I need to force them to agree with me. It's that you say it's not a bug. Well, help me understand. You say this is a feature. Help me be excited about it too. You must see it this way for some reason. Can you help me see it that way too? Because obviously I don't. And when you talk about it in that kind of a way, well, how can the developer be mad at you or anything, right? It's like, no, I want to be excited along with you. I also want to get this out the door. So how can we help each other out? And that skill set I learned not from tech. I learned that from Sprint, dealing with customers who were unhappy with their bills, and talking with troubled teens as well. So what can you use from your prior experience that is not tech or testing related? How can you use that and yet apply it to the tech space, which is very human centric, right? Lots of humans, lots of interactions, communication. How can you use those same skill sets there?
Yeah, it's trying to kind of get to the devs, like, you're trying to work with them, not against them, and like having that empathy. It's like, right, okay, this work is great, but obviously you find a book, like, right, okay, again, how you're saying, how you kind of respond to that. It's like, right, okay, obviously this has happened. How can we work together to make it better? Because we both think it's a great, like saying, it's a great feature. We both want to get this lovely feature out to our clients, our customers, whatever. How can we work together to get it through the door? So yeah, it's like having that empathy. It's always been in the text, like, devs have always kind of saw testers like the enemy. It's like, we're not, though. We're the complete opposite. We want to work with you because we're here for like the common good. So yeah, so we're saying, think about so working with those kids, working with it, being the key word there, being patient as well. Like, try and see other perspectives. I think that's kind of like a key goal that a QA tester, a key skill, should I say, that they have is empathy, patience, and trying to work with rather than against.
Definitely. I think there's so many softer skills, isn't there? And I think when you want to get into a different career path, especially with tech, you can get so overwhelmed and preoccupied with, you know, all of the different tools and all of the different languages. But at the core of it, as Carlos and Chris have both said there, it is a very customer facing and human facing role. So, you know, if you've got the softer skills down, that is half the battle.
Exactly. Have we got time for one more question before we take a quick break, and then we go into agile gaming?
Yes, I think we do. Is anyone got a question?
Just seize the opportunity.
Do it.
Yeah. Hello, good evening.
Oh, hi, Samuel.
Yeah, good evening. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Yeah, my name is Samuel. I'm watching from Finland. I was at the last event, the one held at last month in Manchester. Yeah, presently I'm in Finland with my family just for a short vacation. And my question is this, because I'm a data analyst and I'm trying to switch career from a data analyst to to a software tester. And I've been doing some self-reading, independent reading. I've been going to different seminars, and I've been attending different trainings as well. But I kept asking myself this question: as a tester, how can I quantify my achievement as a tester, my measurable achievement? How can I quantify it? Please, I will appreciate it if you can enlighten me on this one.
And Samuel, you're saying that before you're officially a tester, you're saying, how can you?
Yeah, I'm a data analyst. Yeah.
Yeah. So first off, I think data analytics is pretty awesome, by the way. I think it's actually a pretty sought after role. I believe that software testing is very scientific as much as it is an art form. Like if you ever watch me on my Twitch stream, you'll hear me say things like experiments and hypotheses. Like you'll hear me say terms like that a lot because a lot of what I'm doing is experiments. I don't really know, and I'm trying to tell these stories and design, and I don't know which one's the best one. And so again, kind of going back to what I was saying before, like your foundation of data analytics is going to transfer over to really anything in tech pretty well. But I guess to answer your question, kind of like what we were telling the other gentleman, where you need to somehow visualize. You need to visualize the testing things that you're doing. And so if you are currently in data analytics, like what kinds of tests are you doing? What kinds of things are you monitoring? Are you watching for? Are you observing? What things are you learning from as well? Like all those kinds of points are things that I would want to write down. And if you had a way of automatically visualizing that, even better. But I don't know if that's getting to the question you're asking, because I feel like I'm off now that I'm answering it. But help me there, Samuel.
Hello.
Am I answering your
Yeah.
question? Because I don't know if I am.
Exactly, you are answering the question. Yeah, but if you can maybe like emphasize on like quantifiable achievement, like maybe I tested, like I write 10 test cases every day, I detect like 20 bugs, things like that. How can I quantify like my achievement individually, like the test metrics? So I apply it to my own personal like achievement, things like that.
Yeah.
Because
So
I'm trying to make my CV now.
Yeah.
I'm trying to like make my CV to like it, to make it a tester CV. So I'm trying to like how can I write my quantifiable achievement, things like that.
Yeah. So I would say instead of like, if you're making it for a portfolio, I'm going back to GitHub again. I would have a repo that talks about the different types of testing activities that you're doing. So you could have a repo that's like for Python, let's say, a repo that's for JavaScript, one's for Postman or whatnot. And then one that is just like, here's some interesting testing things that I've done. I would be curious what the application under test is. So which application are you testing to provide context? Because if you just tell me that you found 1,000 bugs, I'll be honest, I don't really care. That doesn't help me, right? Why did you find so many? How many of them were actually high quality bugs? How many of them were low priority that you're just saying to boost your number? So I would want to know what the context is, what application are you testing, and what are the things that you were looking for? What questions did you have when you went into testing it, right? So let's say, for example, you were testing a chatbot, right? Which technically is machine learning, right? You're testing a chatbot. What things are you looking for? And let's say this chatbot is for a bank. You go on the home screen of a bank and the chatbot says, "Hey, how can I help you?" Well, one very good test case I would say is like, if I asked it for my current balance, it should say, I can't give it to you, right? You need to log in first before I can do that, or something like that. If the chatbot returned with my balance before I logged in, I would be very curious as to why it's showing me my balance. And if it's the correct balance, I'd be even more scared. Like, how does a chatbot know who I am at this point? Like, that seems like a security risk, right? And so that's what I'm saying, like, you need to provide some context, because if you just give me a quantity of bugs, you say 1,000 or 10,000, it doesn't affect what I think about you as a tester at all. I want to see the kinds of things you're looking for. What were the experiences you were trying? Why were you going down that route? And then based off of those things, what did you find? And did that change the way that you tested it afterward as you were learning more? Like, those kinds of things to me seem a lot more valuable, because I'm seeing how you are the creative and scientific tester in you. How are you approaching these applications? But you have to have that context. Otherwise, everything's a vanity metric, like 1,000 bugs. Is 1,000 bugs better than 999 bugs? You see what I mean? Like, it becomes a vanity metric where I want quality over quantity. So provide some context, and then hit me with all the creative and scientific ways you would approach testing it.
Yeah, it's a really good point. For us, it's always quality over quantity, as we always say. I'm going to have to, unfortunately, call it there for now. We're going to take a quick 5-minute break, come back at 12:30. So what time is it where you are, Carlos?
Right now it's 12:25 in the afternoon.
Okay, cool. So quick 5 minutes, come back at 12:30, and so obviously in-house will be a bit of fun. I'll do my best to kind of screen share what we're doing for the Agile Gaming. Hopefully it'll make sense. It's called the penny game, and there will be instructions that you can see on screen as I'm doing it as well, that you can read through, and obviously you'll see, because I have the laptop cam going as well. Hopefully it all makes sense. And yeah, so let's take a quick 5 minutes and then reconvene at 12:30. So yeah, catch you guys in a bit. No, again, just want to say thank you so much, Carlos. By the way, that was an amazing talk. So yeah, I don't know.
Thank you.
Just hear my clap is can't multitask that well. Right, yeah, go see you in about 5 minutes.
Perfect. Right, we'll rejoin.